He is now Director of Baseball Research and Development. He started with the Department of Him, and now he has a full department. Obviously, R&D, education, baseball information is very important these days. Please welcome James Click. Now, James, first of all, tell our fans a little bit about what it was like when you got here, and now how far things have advanced in terms of the department, the division of research and development.
Sure. 1 second.
You got enough?
Yeah, I got enough
slack.
Yes, when I first got here, Neil's correct. It was a department of one. It was me. We had no IT department. We had a guy who came in on Tuesdays and Thursdays afternoons and helped out. We had no company email. We've come a long way. So now we have 6 or 7 guys who help me out, and we've got a pretty solid group of guys.
How do you use, as an organization, research and development now versus how you used it then? How's it changed?
Yeah, it's a good question. When it first started out, it was pretty basic. For those of you familiar with the Pitch FX cameras that track the ball between the pitcher's hand and the plate, we didn't have those. We certainly didn't have a lot of data sources that we have now, and obviously when we have 6 guys, we can do a lot more things than just me. So it used to be primarily just for Joe Madden and the Major League coaching staff, and now it touches almost every aspect of the organization.
Give our fans an idea of how you now use it with the other aspects of the organization. How do you use data and information and advanced statistics in the minors? How do you use it for scouting? How do you use it for drafting?
Yeah, I mean, you can use it for almost anything you want. One of the great things about the Rays and the organization that Andrew developed and that Stu and Matt are continuing to put together is that everybody buys into tapping any sort of data source that you can find and any sort of quantitative, qualitative information to help us make better decisions. And so, on the amateur side, that might be helping our scouts travel more efficiently or to analyze their reports a little bit. On the Major League side, a lot of the defensive shifting that has gone on in Major League Baseball, both here and elsewhere, as a result of a lot of data analysis. There's almost innumerable ways that you can try to quantify things to get a little bit of an edge.
Again, James Click is our guest. We're focusing on sabermetrics. If you do have a question, we certainly are happy to answer it. So we do have a wireless mic available for people. If you do at some point have a question as we get in the conversation, want to raise your hand and ask, again, you are welcome to do so. I was curious a little bit about, you mentioned pitch effects. What was it supposed to be used for, and how has, let's say, pitch framing become now such an important part of not only the Rays, but really so many organizations in Major League Baseball?
Yeah, initially it was designed to be used actually for the strike zone. They were trying to help the umpires be more accurate when calling balls and strikes. Eventually they realized they could track the revolutions of the baseball as it's coming into the plate. They're tracking whose curveball breaks the most, whose fastball is fastest, etc. And one of the things that at the plate, like you mentioned with the framing, we've often been told that certain catchers are better at receiving pitches on the edge of the plate and maybe getting a call that another catcher wouldn't by keeping his glove steady or things like that. And so that's a piece of information out there that kind of fell out of that inadvertently, is that there are certain catchers, Rene Rivera is actually one of the very best, at making sure that the umpire gets a really good look at the ball and has a chance to maybe steal a couple more strikes, here and there for our pitchers.
What's the next frontier that fans would want to know about, without revealing too much?
If I revealed the next frontier, I'm pretty sure Matt Silverman would come down here and fire me. The real answer is we don't know. We're trying anything we can. We're obviously in a very, very tough division. I think all of our fans know that. And so we have to search for any edge that we can. And so we'll take forays into new data sources that maybe we don't know if they're going to help us out or not. And if they do, that's great. And then we get an edge on the Red Sox or the Yankees. And if they don't, then we'll move on to something else.
As most of the people here are fans, first and foremost, of the Rays, what should fans be looking for in terms of data? What numbers should they look at? What numbers do they need to toss away? Because I think the general conception is there are still a majority of fans who rely on wins and batting average to equate whether a player is doing well. And most of those of you who raised your hand on the sabermetric questions and follow OPS and follow WAR and follow UZR are looking at it from an entirely different angle.
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is that every piece of data and every statistic out there tells you something. Batting average is something that, we do look at, but the problem with batting average is if you hit a home run or you hit a single, it counts exactly the same. So that's why there are things like slugging percentage. With pitcher wins, there's obviously a lot that has to happen for a pitcher to win a game. A guy can go out there and throw 8 shutout innings and not get a win. He can also go out there and throw 5 innings and give up 5 or 6 runs, and if we happen to score 8 or 9, then he can also get a win. And so you try to be conscious of what the information that you have is telling you. So what should our fans look at in terms of statistics? Everything. You should look at everything.
Again, our discussion is on sabermetrics. Our guest is Director of Research and Development in terms of baseball. That's James Click. If you do have a question that you'd like to ask, we're open to that. Your name and your question.
My name's David. I've got about 140 questions, but I'm really curious about the cultural aspect of traditional, coming from school as a former school statistician and those kind of things. It's always the jock versus nerd kind of thing.
Yeah.
So how has the cultural issues and the cultural hurdles been here getting people to accept new ways of looking at information?
Again, if you missed the question, it was the balance between the coach and the stats, so to speak, or the traditionalist versus the stats.
Yeah, and thank you, David. It's a really good question. That's one of those things that came out of the book and the movie Moneyball, is that there's this fight going on between the stats and the scouts, is the way it's always portrayed. It could not be more overblown, I think, throughout baseball and especially here. And that's because one of the advantages of the disadvantages that we face here at the Rays is that everybody knows, from the coaches to the guys who work with me, to the players, to everybody else, that we have to do things differently and we have to innovate. And if we do things the same as the Yankees and the Red Sox, we're dead in the water. And so there's a culture there because of that, where everybody is open to everything. And I think some of the best insights, some of the most, ball advancing, that's a terrible term, but the most important insights we've had have come from conversations that I've had with scouts, or that our player development people have had with somebody else in the R&D department, and vice versa. We create a culture of communication. You can get 5 people watching a baseball game and they're all watching a completely different game, and we want to get all those people together and talking, because in this industry and any other industry, that's where the best insights come from, and that's where the best, most complete view of what's going on in the field happens.
I would compare that to an accident on a highway, where if 14 people saw it...
Are you saying that my department's like an accident on a highway?
Not at all. But if you see an accident, 14 people would give you 14 different descriptions, and using everyone's interpretation or look at the same thing is going to give you a much different view and a whole lot of different opinions.
Yes, absolutely.
So that's what we meant, not an accident, and no intent there. Next question.
Hi, Neil. John Houston. Question: when you trade away Ben Zobrist, who had the second highest WAR rating in the American League, what does Matt Silverman tell you guys to start looking for?
Somebody who can play 7 different positions. Anytime you make a transaction like that, you have to look at it from every possible angle. Nobody here did not appreciate what Ben brought to the field. I think we can try to quantify as much of it as we can, but what that kind of a player does to your roster, your lineup, if somebody's hurt for a couple days in left field, Ben can play there. If somebody's hurt for a couple days at shortstop, Ben can play there. It's really hard to quantify what that does to keeping an optimal lineup and an optimal team on the field. For me personally, that was a really difficult transaction to talk through and to work through. I think we're really, really excited about the players that we got back, and but yeah, I mean, that one, that's what we look at and we try to quantify it. But a guy like Ben, I mean, just what he brings to the team on and off the field is just really, really tough to quantify.
Great question. Let's get our next one right over here.
Fox, how many extra strikes would a real good pitcher framer do, ball framer, as compared to a poor one?
It's a really good question, and it's hard to say. Per game, you might be talking about a handful, but when you're talking about an extra strike, you have to adjust for the pitcher, the umpire, the catcher, the batter, what count it is. The strike zone gets smaller. I know it doesn't in the rule book, but in real life it gets a little smaller when you get to 0-2 counts, because umpires are a little bit reluctant to ring up a guy on an 0-2 strike. And if it's a 3-0 count, I think we've all talked about a 3-0 strike. So, there's all of these different things that go into it. And so trying to balance all those things out and isolate how much they each move the needle is really complicated. And so I don't have a good answer for you in terms of a single number. But a guy like Renee, again, has shown that he is one of the best at giving the umpire that good look at the ball as it's coming into the plate.
And James, I don't know if there's something you can add on to, but I think I read some recent research. I don't know whether it was Baseball Prospectus or Fangraphs about Jonathan Lucroy, that there are some hitters, because he does such a good job at pitch framing, that hitters expect certain pitches to potentially be strikes that are outside the strike zone, and will lead them to swing at some balls that are borderline but outside the zone more often too.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of ripple effects from this kind of thing. And the same is true of pitchers, especially pitchers like Alex Cobb, who can really locate their fastball. Hitters are going to expand the zone a little bit more than maybe they would elsewhere, because they know that Cobb is so good. So if you see a pitch coming in and you're thinking to yourself, that may or may not be a strike, and then something clicks in your brain, it's like, oh wait, that's Cobb. I got to swing at that, because Alex Cobb is not going to miss his spot. He's going to make sure that that pitch is right on the black.
Next question. Right over here.
Yes, hi. My name is Bill, and I'm a longtime fan of baseball, over 50 years, and I really like what you're doing, and
Thank you.
It's really neat to embrace a team like the Rays because of the advanced statistics. Like, as an amateur analyst, what I like to do with in looking at pitchers, there's a couple of statistics that I like to look at, and one of them is the left on base percentage, and the other one is the EF gap. And what I do with those two is I try to look at them and see where a pitcher is trending, and by doing so I can maybe see that if those numbers are a bit out of whack compared to what is MLB norm or what is his MLB norm, then we can maybe sometimes see that he may be a pitcher who's having an unusually bad year because of that, or an unusually good year because of that. I wonder what your feelings were on those two particular statistics.
Yeah, there are, especially these days, almost innumerable ways to break down what a pitcher is doing and what he's seeing on the mound. And I think one of the things that we're very familiar with after, a couple of years ago when James Shields had that 1 year where he had like a 5-something ERA, and he gave up, I think, the most home runs in the league or something like that. What we did was we looked at what Shields really did, and he had a lot of fly balls that just snuck over the wall, and they happened to just sneak over the wall when there were 2 or 3 guys on base. And so you play that season out 100 times, and he's going to have an ERA more close to his career norms almost every time. And he had, you don't like to say unlucky, but he had an unlucky year in a lot of ways. And so, we look at those kind of things and a lot of other, data that we have to try to help us really discern what is the pitcher actually doing, and what is, as soon as he releases the ball and everything that happens behind him with all the fielders and the parks and the wind and everything else, and try to normalize, I hate that word, but normalize, for lack of a better term, what's going on. So yeah, we do look at those things and everything else that we possibly can in order to try to figure out what's really going on.
Take a question from right in the middle.
Hi, I'm Carrie. I would love to know, I know how much the sabermetrics helps the team. What is your feeling as the impact on the fan base? So, they talk about the NFL, fantasy football, the stats has brought in a new group of fans. Do you feel the sabermetrics has brought in a new group of fans, or does it kind of scare the more casual fan?
Well, I hope it doesn't scare any of the casual fans, but I can certainly understand when you start talking about, catcher framing and some in FIP, And there's an alphabet soup out there, and everybody is creating their own metric. And you know, this is the great thing about baseball. It's a giant discussion about what we should actually be looking at and what we shouldn't. For me personally, I love it. I mean, but this is my job, and so I eat it all up. Everybody's coming out with a new metric. I want to know how they did it and see if it's something that we can use. Anything that we can do to educate and enlighten and engage more fans, we're going to do it. And I hope that having, this kind of data out there and all this information out there, that we can talk about catchers receiving. We can talk about whose curveball breaks the most. We can talk about whose fastball it really is the fastest. It allows us to settle a lot of those old bar debates that people used to have in bars. Now, there's good and there's bad in that, because some of those bar debates are pretty fun.
Speaking of good and bad and settling debates, it's hard to tell with advanced metrics on defense. But
Right.
You guys are going to get more information, not you, but every team in baseball, that will help in that. It's, I guess, how you're going to use the data, right?
Yeah, exactly. Major League Baseball is coming out with a product called StatCast. There's going to be several large cameras around the field that are actually going to be tracking players on several times a second. And so we can say, when the ball was hit, the left fielder was 305 feet. Well, I hope he wasn't that far away. That'd be a little deep. But, 305 feet from home plate, and, at this angle, and he covered, 20 yards in 2.4 seconds. And, we'll be able to access a lot of information that we haven't been able to access before.
And probably will give you a better idea of who really is a good. Is that the hardest thing to gauge right now? Defense.
I wake up most mornings and I have a list of about 8 things that are the hardest thing to gauge. I think defense is definitely up there. That said, it's something I don't worry about too much, because we know Kevin Kiermaier is a tremendous defender. We know Desmond Jennings is a tremendous defender, and so we certainly look forward to quantifying just how much better than everybody else DJ and Kevin and Steven Souza and all these guys are. But it's not something I worry about terribly too much.
We got time for one more. One more question? No? One more up front?
Second of the other 140.
Oh no, we've got a heckler over here.
How did you get your job?
How did I get my job with the Rays? I had some photos of Andrew Friedman that I promised.